Yes, so we are live. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Conscious Parenting. Our goal on this show is to introduce you to the people and to the ideas that will help you raise kids who are happy, resilient, and have the skills they need to thrive in their world. One of the questions that a lot of families have asked over the last couple of weeks is, can I bring on somebody who can speak about sexual health education for kids? And I know that is a thorny topic for a lot of people. I know when my kid was 5 years old, my son was 5 years old a few years ago, I got home from work and he asked me, Daddy, what is a boobie? And that totally freaked me out. But I realized then that if kids don't hear from you about sexual education or about sex, they will find that information from somewhere else. And the person that we have coming on today is one of the foremost authorities in the world on sexual health education for kids. She's been a sexual health educator for over 20 years, specifically teaching adults who work with kids about childhood sexuality and childhood and sexual abuse prevention. She also consults and facilitates for a couple of organizations, including the U.S. Air Force Youth and Family Services, and she is the author of award-winning books. She wrote Birds Plus Bees Plus Your Kids, a guide to sharing your beliefs about sexuality, love, and relationships. And she also wrote Dating Smarts, what every teen needs to know to date, relate, or wait. But I guess one of the things that I love the most about her work is how relatable it is. It doesn't sound like something from a textbook, even though she does have a degree in behavioral psychology. It doesn't sound dry. It sounds like something that a lot of parents can really relate to. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Amy Lang. Hey, Amy, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Great. It's awesome to have you here, Amy. Thanks for making the time. So diving right in, can you start by just telling us why you think it's really important for parents to address the issue of sexual health education?
Well, I think that it is really important because of what you just said. They're going to get it whether we're giving it to them or not. And these days, especially the way the world is changing, and because of the internet, kids are getting more and more information than we ever had, than I certainly ever had. And so I think that the thing is that we know that kids who have comprehensive sexual health education that's based in parental values do better. They feel better. They make better choices. They're more likely to confide in us if they have a problem. And I love your story about like, oh no, boob, what is that? What am I going to do with my 5-year-old in that? Because it's super typical. And I think sometimes we see these opportunities, like we have these opportunities and we're like, oh no, what am I going to do with this? And you have to make a decision. And we, when we talk to kids early about sexuality, it's helpful to them because now your boy is going to see you as the guy to go to, right? Instead of maybe his cousin or, his pal, which eventually they all go to their pals like we did. And so it just sets you up as the person in their life. And I think that with sexuality, of course, it's just fraught, right? There's so much there. We have so many concerns and worries. And then we also have our own personal experiences and that influences everything. And so it becomes this big, like this huge thing for us as the parents. And I think that one of the things that's really important for everyone to remember is that you don't have to start with the tough stuff when you're talking to your kids, pretty much no matter how old they are. And the other thing to remember is that they don't know, like compared to what you know, they don't know nothing, right? They're really blank slates or like empty vessels is how I like to think about, especially younger kids. And I know that most of the folks we're talking to today have kids who are somewhere in that kind of elementary age range. And, when you're willing to kind of get over your discomfort and open your mouth and have these conversations with your kids, even though they might not like it in the moment, we know from just study after study after study that kids whose parents were willing to be uncomfortable, were willing to make those efforts to talk about sexuality, love, and relationships, they do better. They feel better about themselves. They tend to wait a little longer before they have sex. They have a better sense of what a healthy relationship looks like. And then when they do decide to have sex, and pretty much everybody decides to have sex eventually, they do it safely, which for me is really huge, for me is really huge.
You touched on something just now, right? You said that a lot of times people don't have that talk, parents don't have that talk because they feel really uncomfortable about the topic. And I know my kids are still 9 and 7 now, but when it gets to talking about a few things, I just feel, icky is not the right word, but it just feels weird, right? So what's the first thing you tell parents? How do we get over that kind of thing? Like, what are a few tips you can share with us?
Yeah, there are some things we need to do. And I had to do them too. I'd been a sexual health educator for like a really long time. And I just had assumed, I was working with adults and teenagers, and I just assumed I was going to be a rock star when I had a kid. And when Milo was he's 18 now, by the way. When he was about 4, he was getting ready for a bath and he grabbed his penis and he's like, "Hey, mama, did you know?" And I stood there and I thought, oh no. Please do not tell me it feels good to touch your penis, because I got nothing. And I had this little moment of panic, and I was like, great, I'd rather talk to a pregnant 14-year-old girl than my 4-year-old son. And that was what kind of sparked my interest in helping parents talk with kids about the birds and the bees, because I needed help and I knew a bunch of stuff. I mean, I could talk to anybody about anything, but I couldn't talk to my 4-year-old about his tallywhacker. So here's the first thing. You need to understand that your kids' experience of sex and sexuality and relationships and learning about all of that is very different than yours. So when we come into the conversation, we come in with all this information about sex. So we know we've had it. We know what it is. We know the good, the bad, the ugly. We've seen movies and music, and most of us have seen some kind of pornography. And so we have this like big load of stuff coming into the conversation. And some of it's great and some of it's really crappy. So we look at our kid and we think, oh no, oh hell no, I cannot talk to you about sex. And so that's that kind of icky, weird feeling, which really has everything to do with us and not really much of anything to do with our kids. And, the other piece that comes into play is that personal piece, like your own experience of sexuality, your personal story, your history. And for most women in particular, we have trauma in our backgrounds. And so we look at our sweet 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old and we think, not happening. So here's the first thing you need to do. You need to kind of like separate yourself. So that's your crap, right? That's all about you. That's your perspective. And so, yes, that's on the table, but you don't need to bring that into your child's life per se. So when you think about your child, so that's you, that's most of us, all that business is going on for us, that sort of information overload. And then when you look at your kiddo, they don't know what you know. They don't have the same experience. They don't know there's anything yucky, bad, embarrassing, or shameful about sex. They don't know that there's anything amazing, super fun, and fabulous about sex. They're pretty much, like I said, like they're an empty vessel. And so we have this opportunity to give them what most of us did not have, which is this experience of learning about sexuality and love and relationships as a normal part of their growing up, as a normal part of the family conversation, as a normal and healthy part of life. And so if we can remember that the goal is that we want to raise whole, healthy, happy adults, which absolutely that's my whole mission. Like, I don't like the sex talking thing is just my vehicle. Like, I want every child to grow up to be a whole, healthy, happy adult. And as you know, as adults, this is a huge part of your health and your life, and everything kind of comes back to this. And so I think if you can think about this as like giving your kid a gift, the gift of understanding sexuality, seeing you as a resource, learning about values about sexuality, and feeling good and confident about this part of life. I mean, that is a huge gift. And, one last thing. If you just think about your own experience as a kid learning about sexuality, imagine what it would have been like if you had one trustworthy adult, or more than one would be better, who helped you through this, helped you understand it. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you would have made different decisions. I certainly would have. My parents gave me books, and that was great, but it wasn't the same as having conversations.
Interesting. Okay, so let's say there's a parent listening to this right now, and she's wondering how much information is too much information for my 8-year-old, my 9-year-old, my 7-year-old. How do you approach this? How do you layer that information in terms of level of complexity or depth or detail based on the age of the child?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think it's confusing. And I know that in the US, we start sex ed for kids in school at about like fifth grade. And so culturally here, there's this idea that that's the time to start the party. And I don't know if that's the same for y'all or if you even have sex ed in your school system. You can answer me that.
It will so there are a couple of people tuning in, but it's going to differ from country to country, from state to state, from school to school.
Yeah. So, but somehow there's this idea like 10 is 11, 12 is kind of the time. So for an 8-year-old, the place to start is to ask the questions like, hey, have you ever heard the word sex? Do you know what it means? And you need to be ready, right? You need to be ready for them to say, oh yeah. And then to ask, well, what do you think it means? And they may say, well, it means whether or not you're a boy or a girl, right? Or they may say, oh, that's how babies are made. Or they may say any number of things. And so that's the first conversation with a kid that's 8 or 9, because you need to kind of gauge where they are. And if they seem clueless, like, oh my God, don't talk to me about that. If they're like, what? Then that tells you they've had some kind of information about it, and it involves penises and vaginas. Chances are really high. So after you say that, then the next thing I recommend that you say is, like, you're going to have to do that poker face thing. I know some of you are familiar with this parenting technique, and some of you are not very good at it. That's me. So you do this poker face, and you just say, you know what? Thanks for telling me that. And here's the deal. You're old enough now for us to start talking about this really important part of life. You're going to hear a lot of different things about it. And I want you to know that I am your best resource for this. And then that is all you say. Don't say anything else. So you've planted the seed. We're going to start talking about this. And then in the next day or two, just if you can, get a book. There are great books out there for talking with kids about sex. This is actually your best tool, because you can get a book and you just open it up and everyone's focused on the book, right? Because
you don't have to look into each other's eyes at the time.
Oh yeah, it's really hard. And some kids are super open. Some kids are like, oh my God, no, I'm not. Never going to talk to you about this. And so let me just talk about the open kids, and then we'll talk about dealing with the kids that are like, hell no. So then you say, here, we got this great book, and let's read it together. And don't be afraid, because when you act like you're afraid, your kids are going to pick up on that vibe. It's hard. You can say, I'm uncomfortable talking about this with you. My parents did not talk to me. I wish they had. I would have felt better about my relationships and dating and this part of life. And then you jump in. And, I think one of the easiest things to do also as an entry point, and this should be happening when your kids are younger, is just to be using the correct names for private body parts. That makes the full-on sex conversations easier. If they already know that boys have penises and girls have vaginas and vulvas, and that someday when they're in their late 20s, early 30s, those parts might come together, and that's called having sex or making love. And so
instead of saying like PP or whatever, you call it the actual name.
Yeah. One of the things about that is that when we use the correct names for private body parts with kids, when they know the correct names, if something happens to them, someone touches them inappropriately, they'll get help faster. If they say, Uncle Creepy touched my penis, you're not going to be like, what do you mean? It's going to be straight up. There's a story about a young girl who was I think she was in first grade or so. And she said to her teacher, Grandpa touched my cookie. And the teacher said, oh, sweetie, you should share. That's sweet of you. You should share with Grandpa. And this girl was tenacious, and she went back and she's like, Grandpa touched my cookie again. And the teacher said, yeah, I know, we talked about this, and you should share with your grandpa. And then finally she asked again, which is kind of amazing because kids oftentimes ask once, get rejected, and then don't ask again. And then the teacher finally said, what do you mean by cookie? And the girl, pointed to her crotch. And then they got the girl help. So imagine if that girl had said to her teacher, Grandpa touched my vagina. Different story, right?
Yeah.
And I know.
Straight away.
Yeah, and I know it's hard to say those words. So, a couple of tips when you're by yourself, you just penis, 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 vulva, 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 like anus, 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 like say all the words so you get more comfortable saying them. And if your kids, if you have been using, pet names like pee pee or hoo ha or cookie, which I don't recommend that one, just say, you're old enough now to know that that's called penis. And you're old enough now to know that that's called, like, girls have a vagina. It's a hole inside their body. The part that you can see on the outside is called the vulva. Most folks don't use that term, but it's the more accurate than vagina because you can't see vaginas really easily. Takes some acrobatics and mirrors and things. Really the first sex talk should be the correct names of private body parts. And you can do that with a baby because, babies and people who are under 4 are awesome because they don't notice our discomfort. Your 9, 10, 11-year-old is going to be like, what is up with you, right? Why are you being so weird? And because, again, that's like our natural discomfort. And I just want to be super clear. I am not perfect at this. Like, I get weird with Milo. I mean, he's 18 now, so we have no, we just talk about everything. But there's a period of time where I'm like, oh, God, I got to talk about this thing. And I'd have to get myself like geared up to do it. So anyway, back to your 8-year-old. Books, best friend. If you have a kiddo who's like, hell no, I'm not talking to you about this, then a couple things. You need to tread a little more lightly. You need to say pretty clearly, you know what, I get that you're uncomfortable, but we have to talk about this. So we'll just do it in short and sweet conversations. And then you need to start. And, you can say, hey, when I asked you what sex is, I just want to make sure you understand that this is what it is. And that is a hard thing to do as a parent, but you can do it really casually. Like if kids are helping with housework or you're folding laundry together or washing dishes, you can say, hey, I just need to tell you a sex thing really quick. So, sex is how, most folks make babies. And here's what it is. And I know you don't want to hear this, so just give me like 3 minutes. And then you say, usually the man and woman's body get really close together. They agree to do this. It feels good to their grown-up bodies. Right? We're planting a little seed there. And the man's penis goes in the woman's vagina, but there's some sperm. It comes out of his penis. It goes find the egg, blah, 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 blah. Keep it really, really simple. And then they know what that is. And then you throw in your values there, right? Like if you believe that people should not have sex until they're married, then say that. But here's the deal about that. By the way, like I'm a liberal crazy pants about this stuff, but I am a firm believer in values and communicating our values. And so if you believe that you should wait until you're married to have sex, you need to tell them why marriage is the goal. Because marriage, like just wait till you're married, is not compelling. Most people worldwide have sex before I can't remember if it's 19 or 21, like pretty much everybody's done it by the time they're in their early 20s. And so you want your kiddo to know like why marriage is the goal, because there's lots of great stuff about marriage. And we all know the good stuff about being married, right? Commitment, communication, stability in the relationship, that sort of thing.
That is super. One of the things that I love the most about what you said is getting a feeler for where they're at. What do you know about sex? And then that way you're not dumping unnecessary information on them, or you're able to give them information that's at the level they're currently at. That's amazing. So you touched on a bit about how to prevent sexual abuse. You mentioned that if you start using the correct names, that will help people, really flag up things really quickly. What are the other things that parents who are worried about sexual abuse can begin to do to protect their kids and to help them be aware so that they are able to escalate when those kind of things happen?
Yeah, this is such an important part of parenting, and it's something that we're really anxious about, and understandably, right? I mean, it is one of the most terrifying things to have happen to a child. And, a couple things that have been out in the world that are just not true. The biggest one is stranger danger. Stranger danger is a total myth. The chance of a stranger abducting your child, touching your child inappropriately, raping your child is really, really, really low. I suppose we should all just take a breath here for a minute. Sorry, I forget. Like, oh, this is my work. So just take a pause.
There we go.
Here we go. I know, sorry, but not sorry. So the stranger danger thing is not helpful to kids. So what we're doing is we're teaching them to be afraid of the world, We're teaching them actually to be afraid of help. And so I know that if a child ever came up to me and said, I've lost my mom, I've lost my dad, I'm scared, I would never say, don't talk to me, I am a stranger, right? Like, we just wouldn't do that. And that's like 98% of the population. Okay, so that's the first thing. So let go of stranger danger. And this is the hardest piece. The person that's most likely to molest your child is someone that's known to you, someone who's known to the family. And I know that many of you can look back at your own experience, and you're going to tell me, we're not going to ask, but it was someone that you knew, someone that was known to the family. So that means we need to teach our kids about body boundaries. We need to teach our kids about safe touches. We need to teach our kids about consent. We need to talk about trusting their intuition. So a couple things with body boundaries. So first of all, you should just say straight up to your kids, hey, just wanted to let you know, and I want you to watch me, okay? Just say, hey, just wanted to let you know that it's not okay for anyone to touch you in a way that you don't like. A pinch, a poke, touching your privates, all these kinds of things are not okay. And you have the right to say no if anyone touches you in a way that you don't like. And you need to let me know. Mm-hmm. And also, it's not okay for you to touch anybody in that way. So it's not okay for you to touch somebody else's privates. You need to let me know. You won't be in trouble. This is super important, because when you say that, it's a lean in for your kid, right? And then you bloody hell better be telling the truth, right?
Be ready not to freak out when that happens.
Exactly, exactly. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I know culturally, like, I'm a white American gal and we roll differently than probably most of you. But in some cultures, there's greeting with a kiss is completely normal. There's physical contact that is close, right? So that's a normal cultural part of your culture. But here's the deal. Don't ever say to your child, hey, kiss grandma, kiss grandma, kiss grandma, or hey, give Uncle Creepy a hug, or whatever. Sorry about Uncle Creepy. They're Aunt Creepies too. But so don't ever force your child to touch someone. Ask first. Say, hey, do you want to give grandma a kiss? Hey, do you want to give uncle a hug? And let them decide if they're going to have physical contact with this person. That does two things. The first thing it does is it establishes you as their protector. It also establishes a norm of communication around physical contact. And, in families, like with parents and kids, it's really hard to say, can I give you a hug, like 7,000 times a day? And there's a lot of body language that we do, right? Like, hey, I'm going to give you a hug. And, I force my child to hug me because he's like, I don't want to touch anyone. I'm like, hey, man, I made you. You were inside of me for a really long time. So don't go crazy with it. With younger kids, it's a really fun thing to role play, and you can just do it with like high fives. It's like, just say, okay, we're going to practice. So I'm going to ask me if I want a high five, and your kid will say, hey, can I give you a high five? And you say, no, thanks. And then your child respects that. And then you do the reverse. Hey, can I give you a high five? And your kid says, sure. So you give a high five. And then they say no. And you say, okay, no problem. Because again, you're demonstrating safe boundaries, safe behavior. So those are two really important things. Also, using the correct names for private body parts is totally protective. Someone's not going to be less likely to mess with your kid if they're like, hey, do not, like, I've got my penis here. It goes up and down. And that kid saying penis tells that person someone's talking to this child, right? Someone's talking to this child. Let me see if there's anything else in my little brain for y'all. And then sex talks. They're protective, because you'll say to your kid, this is not for kids, it's for later in life, but you need to know because it's really important. It's a really great part of life. It's fascinating, and you need to be really ready. So this is how we get you really ready for dating and relationships, and eventually, having full-on sex or making love with someone. I'm gonna stop.
One of the things that I know you often talk about, and I've come across that in a bit of your work online, is parents who are worried about teenage pregnancy. How do you help your child not fall into that trap? Because that would be heartbreaking for any parent. What do you do? What do you tell them?
Yeah. So again, it's just this early sex education, being there, being really open. You do need to really establish with your kids, even if you want them to wait, right? Even if you want them to wait, you need to say, hey, if you make the decision to have sex with someone, here's what you need to know. your partner, if it's a girl, you need to be on birth control. Like that is absolutely, you have to do that. If your son is having a girlfriend, you need to talk about like, hey, have you talked about birth control? If she's on birth control, girls go on birth control way sooner than before they have sex all the time. It's oftentimes to clear up their skin, or that's the excuse. And just because a girl's on birth control does not mean she's going to have sex. They don't take it as permission. They still wait until their average age is 17, like 17 and a half. They'll still wait until that age, even if they're on birth control from the time they're 14. And if this is a hard thing, right? Because it feels like permission. But like you said, no one wants a teen pregnancy. And then the other piece, of course, is pushing condoms. Because you can, as one of my, the moms of one of my best friends always said, you can catch more than a baby. And right. And so the condom thing, condoms are not optional. As we know, in those early teenage relationships, there's a lot of philandering that goes on. So, you got to use a condom. And, we're seeing, because of more birth control access and that kind of thing, we're seeing increased rates, especially among young people, of HPV and chlamydia, which is like the common cold of the crotch. Like, look at the crotch and you got chlamydia. It's really easy to get. And then in gay communities, we're seeing an upswing in gonorrhea and syphilis and that kind of thing, which of course comes back into the heterosexual communities. So don't be afraid to be open about birth control and condom use, because you want them to be ready. They're not going to do it. I mean, it's all this, right? Once they're in teenagers, you're just like, okay, please don't get anyone pregnant, right? So if you establish, like, our family value is that you wait until you are ready for pregnancy, you plan your pregnancies, and you plan for sex, then they're going to do better. And even if they're like, oh my God, don't talk to me about this, that's actually not what's happening. They're really more like, shut up, keep talking, shut up, keep talking, because they can't tell us that they need to hear from us, especially for those of you with teenagers, this, right? They're like, I know everything. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Okay, so one of the last questions I'm going to ask you before we move on to the work that you do personally, it has to do with a lot of the content that's out there right now. So you have a kid that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever age, and you know that there's a lot of garbage out there that has to do with wrong information about sex, pornography that just portrays sex to be something totally wrong, or information from friends. Like, how do you shield kids from that? So I understand it's important to talk to them at home. So you've given them a perspective initially, but how do you protect them from all the junk that's out there?
It's hard. I mean, honestly, I wish it was 10 years ago still. It was so much easier then. And it's hard. And that's because of the internet. So even if you're super careful about your kids' screen time, if you're using monitoring software and you have parental controls in place, most families don't. So here's my little shaming moment. Don't be that family. Like, there's monitoring software that's $50 a month that works really, really well. It's called Custodio. It starts with a Q. You can go to my website and my resources page and you can get it. You can install it on every device your kid accesses the internet on. I did it in 15 minutes. It's really great, because that way, if your kid is searching boob, right, or porn, or any sex term, it'll get blocked. And then the beauty is you'll get an email that says, hey, your kid went here. And then that's a conversation opportunity. So that's the first thing. Don't be that family, because here's what happens. So you're all smart and locked down and good, and your kid can't go anywhere much on the interwebs. And then they go to a friend's house, or they're with a friend who's got a phone, and they're all over it. There's no protection there. And so they're going to see this stuff. They're not going to know what to do with it. It can be really traumatizing and scary to see pornography. And so you need to tell your kids, like, straight up, you're going to see this, you're going to see sex stuff online. Everybody sees it. No kid escapes childhood without seeing it. You're going to see this. It's people having sex. It's not real. They're actors. It's really scary and gross and creepy for kids to see this, because, not every adult thinks that, right? For kids to see this. So the rule is, and kids are really rules oriented at this age, which is lovely, and say the rule is that if you see something like that, you need to walk away, give them a script to use with their kids. And like, one of the things I have older kids say is like, dude, I think looking at porn is a solo activity, and they can step away. They save face. And then with younger kids, just the rule is like, if you see that, stop looking, and you can tell an adult. You can tell me, you won't get in trouble, right? So we're always going to come back to that. You can ask me anything, you can tell me anything, you won't get in trouble, because that tells them that you're safe. And then you got to really, when they tell you something, like you said, you really got to keep your poop in a group, right? And it's okay if you're surprised and like, oh my God, what the hell, right? And have a little freak out. And the second you catch yourself doing that, just shut up and take a breath, and then say, I am so sorry. I was so surprised to hear you tell me that, ask me that you saw that. Of course, I'm just worried about your safety and your health. So let me take a breath and let's talk about this, which is actually a pretty good parenting trick regardless, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just really hard now. And so the other thing too is just to have casual conversations like with your kids and like, hey, what are your friends talking about? And, like an easy entree with older kids is to talk about puberty, right? So, hey, anybody having their period? You don't have to name names. Are you feeling ready? And like talking about it and talking with our boys about it, because rumors fly, right? Rumors fly. Like, I'm not a boy, so I don't know what y'all were talking about when you were kids, but whatever was going on, it's still going on. And it probably isn't necessarily the best.
Amazing. Okay, so tell people a bit about what you do. How do you help parents? How do you help organizations? What do you do for families?
So my main priority is working with families. And what I do is I help you, this is a little glib, but I help you get over yourself and get on with the talks. The conversations don't have to be really uncomfortable or scary or long. So what I help parents do is figure out, okay, how do I want to have these conversations? What parts of me do I need to manage so I can engage fully with my kids about this? And then I give you tips and tricks and tools for having the conversations. I have an online solution center, and it's just full of stuff to help you figure out how to do this. And I think
that's the one they can find at birdsandbeesandkids.com, right?
Yeah,
that's my. So for anyone listening, if you navigate to birdsandbeesandkids.com, there's a lot of great stuff there. If you go to parents, there are resources. She has online courses. You can subscribe to like a monthly subscription service. Just tell us a bit about that.
So in my newsletter, I just send out tips and tricks and blogs and information just to kind of keep things top of mind. And I think that the thing for parents is that this is not a one and done conversation. And so my goal with the newsletter in particular is to keep these conversations going. I'll give you a little like, hey, talk about this, or plant a seed. And then I also really believe, and I firmly believe this, that you are the best sex educator for your kids because you're going to share your values. Like, your values are what gives kids roots. If you can talk about, values clarification is actually one of the hardest things for parents. And then once you've done that, the rest of it is just facts and science. So I help you, plan for the conversations. I help you feel more comfortable, confident. That's my whole deal. That's my whole goal. Like, I want you to see yourself as the person for your kid. And more importantly, I want your kids to see you as the person to talk to about this stuff. It's just healthier for them. It's better for them. And it's hard on you, but whoever said parenting is like not hard, right? It's all hard.
So my final question to you, right? At the beginning of our talk, one of the things you mentioned was that you want to help parents raise kids that are happy, that are prepared to, to take on the world, and that the sexual education talk is just a vehicle. So now let's get a bit personal. Imagine it's your 70th birthday. Your son is there with his wife, with your grandkids, right? And he stands up to give a speech about the impact you've had in his life. What would you love to hear him say?
Ugh, no one's ever asked me that. Kind of makes me a little weepy. I think what I'd like him to say is that my husband and I gave him a really good foundation, and that he felt confident in his early relationships, that he was able to make decisions that felt good to him. He felt like his partners felt good, that he grew up like thinking and knowing and understanding that being sexual is a totally normal, lovely part of being human. And that, even by his ability, like his knowledge, like he helped his friends. And I see that now already, like how he talks to me about his friends and stuff. And I just would like to see that he, like this was just normal, right? Like what do you, like, I'd almost like him to say, what's the big deal here, people, right? That would be I would love to have him say that. And I mean, who doesn't want to have a big impact on their child, right? And I also would love for him, like it was mortifying for him as a kid to be like, what does your mom do? Oh my God. Like he'd say, what do I say? And I said, just say I'm a parent educator. They'll just walk away from you. They won't know what that is. And so now he gets a lot of cred out of it with his friends. He's like, yeah, my mom's a sex educator. So anyway, yeah, thank you for asking me that. I love that question.
Hey,
yeah, thank you.
This has been so much fun, Amy. It's been great chatting with you. I've learned a lot. I know my community has also learned a lot. Thank you so very much for coming on the show, and we will definitely be in touch. Thanks,
yes,
Amy.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a wonderful 35 minutes with Amy. I know that you definitely have learned things, because I have as well. One of the most important takeaways that I want you guys to have is that it's not a very comfortable conversation, but that's why we are parents. Parenting is a tough thing. And also, just like Amy said towards the end, it's not a one and done thing. It's something that you want to keep top of mind, so that you constantly are checking in with your kids and making sure that they find you as their trusted advisor. Thank you very much. Don't forget to follow our page and subscribe. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.